So I received an email the other day from a dear, long-standing friend. And she described their situation, their family situation, and the amount of work that they have to do and the kind of struggles that they were facing even before this COVID-19 monster came along. She said, do you have any advice for people who are not even trying to thrive? They're just aiming to barely survive, right? That is an understandable question. I think a lot of people are living right there. And while it is definitely understandable, and this video is about that, it's not survivable. It's not sustainable. It isn't workable to stay there. Because this is not going to be a sprint. This is not going to be something like where you hold onto the furniture and you wait for the hurricane to pass and you come outside and the sun's out. The hurricane is inside the human population. So every time we come out, it's going to get bad again. We have to be ready for the long haul on this one. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips to help you move from barely surviving toward thriving. So tip number 1, survey your present practices. You are already doing something to try to take care of yourself. What are you doing? What do you avoid eating? What kind of exercise do you try to get? What are you doing for your emotional health already? What are you doing in order to keep your mind sharp already? How are you looking after your relationships? How do you pursue your connection with God? You already have some practices in all 5 dimensions. Survey those and see which ones you could easily adjust, or which ones you could just afford to make more vivid or afford to make extra space for in your life. Survey your present practices and understand what you're already doing. Number 2, practice the Via Negativa. That's a fancy Latin word for the way of negation or the way of removal. Often the best thing you can do for yourself, and certainly the best place to start, is not in adding things to your already full life, but in removing things that you don't need, things that have been hurting you all along. You can no longer afford to let them live in your village with you. So what could you remove that is causing unhelpful stress in your life? Like, could you afford to do less social media checking? Could you afford to spend less time online? Could you afford to eat less processed sugar? What could you afford less of? What could you remove that is definitely hurting you, or probably hurting you, that if you removed now, it would help you a lot? That is the Via Negativa. Start there. All right, step number 3 is understand stress. There are 2 kinds of stress. There's eustress and distress. Eustress is good stress, and distress is bad stress. That's a wild oversimplification, but this is a YouTube video and not a PhD thesis. When I put a barbell on my back and squat, I'm putting a lot of strain, a lot of stress on my muscles and bones. That's eustress, especially if I give myself time to recover, because at the end of it, I will be stronger. When I'm hit by a car and sent tumbling through the air and land with a crunch and a heap on the pavement, break bones and tear muscles, that is distress. I will not come back from that better without a lot of surgical care. When I go for a 5-mile run, that stresses my cardiovascular system in a good way, eustress. When I get a respiratory infection, that stresses my cardiovascular system in a very bad way, distress. You want to get more eustress in your life as long as you have space to recover from it, and you want to get less distress in your life. But even beyond kinds of stress, there's also your attitude towards stress. I'll put a link in the description below to the TED Talk I'm referring to. I can't remember the woman's name. She did amazing work with how your attitude towards stress affects its impact on you. Basically, the results were these. People who don't think they have a lot of stress in their lives, who didn't have a lot of stress in their lives, have like a medium longevity. People who had a lot of stress in their lives and thought it was bad for them, they had the worst longevity. And people who had a lot of stress in their lives and didn't think it was bad for them had the best longevity. It turns out that the number 1 factor in stress's effect on you is not the stress, but whether or not you think it's making you or breaking you. That's worth thinking about. So tip number 4 is establish a minimal habit. You want to establish one habit in each of the 5 dimensions. One physical habit, cognitive habit, emotional habit, one relational habit, one spiritual habit. Again, you might already have your habit. You might just want to tweak it a little bit. You want to make a tiny improvement in each of those 5 dimensions. You want to establish the habit, make it as clear, as explicit and vivid as you can, so it's easily understandable and there's no vagueness to fuzzy it up when you can't remember what you're doing or you have stress fog in your head. And then you want to build your day, your schedule, around execution of those 5 things. You want to make sure the day is built around thriving, that thriving isn't crammed into the corners. So this tip has to do with setting the priority on thriving and setting the calendar and the schedule so that you can. But it's establish a minimum habit, a small thing. It has to be hard enough that you notice it, barely, but easy enough that it's hard to fail. Establish that and work it. The same exact thing, make no improvements, the same exact thing every day for 7 days. And then tip number 5 is practice the art of Kaizen. There's a bunch written on the internet about Kaizen. It's a Japanese word. It basically means the art of incremental improvement, the art of improving by 1% every day. Don't worry about the everyday and don't worry about the 1%. The point is you want to improve in each dimension every day. After that first week where all you're doing is holding the ground and establishing the habit, you want to make tiny improvements. Every time I get under the barbell, I'm adding 1 kilo. Now, I can't even feel that. I've got 130 kilos on my back. I can't feel 1 kilo. But if I put enough weight on there that I feel the improvement, that's too much to heal from. You want to make tiny improvements continually. Because what you're really trying to do, you're not trying to become your best self. You're trying to establish momentum toward better. You will never be your best self. And the day you are, if you keep going, you'll be your best self the next day. That whole pursuit is kind of silly. What you want to do is establish momentum away from sickness and toward fitness. Because people who are in motion toward fitness are harder to kill. All right, there's your 5 tips. Remember, you will not be graded for this. You will get no points. There's no moral value on this. But also remember that if you're too busy driving to stop and get gas, you're not going to get very far. This is not a sprint. This will be a marathon. And you've got to design your life with that in mind. Be on the lookout for more videos soon. I'm going to be making some videos on concrete, simple practices that you can incorporate into your Thrive plan. To help you thrive in all 5 dimensions. Love and peace. I hope you thrive.